Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Daily Record Celtic podcast. And it's fair to say it's a huge week for the club on and off the park. So with that in mind, we thought we'd go for the very best in the final stages of the window. We've got a man who's been involved in big Celtic transfers. The Champions League draw is looming this week, and he's been part of plenty of huge European nights at home and abroad with the club. And then on Sunday, it's Celtic against Rangers. And again, he's no stranger to the cutting edge of the biggest derby of the lot. So, without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome the one and only Michael Gannon to the podcast.
I've not been involved in many transfer windows, but I've done some last minute Christmas shopping. Does that count?
We also have Chris Sutton. Chris, how are we?
Yeah, very good. I knew there was something. I knew it was going to go. There was going to be something derogatory aimed at me. That was good. That was good for you. Well done. Good start.
It was quite obvious, to be fair, but it was like Arjen Robben. You know what he's going to do. He's going to come in on his left side, but you can't stop him scoring.
Yeah, you do obvious well.
Thank you. In terms of doing obvious well, we might as well get straight to it. We're a month into the competitive season. Chris, where do you see Celtic just now?
We see Celtic on top of the table, I think. Look, I mean, let's get it right. It has been a difficult start, hasn't it, for Celtic? Things just haven't clicked. They're not quite right, albeit it's early days. I think that it's fair to say it's been a pretty underwhelming transfer window in terms of recruitment, and I think Brendan's said so as much himself. But there is still time left in the window to sort the situation out, and for there to be a thought process amongst the Celtic fan base that the club are moving in the right direction. I'm not so sure that the Celtic fan base feel that is the way at this moment in time, though. But there's still time to, not going to say save the season, but time to get things rolling for Celtic.
Michael, has Chris gone too early on that? Well, 3 league games into the season, 1 League Cup tie, transfer window not closed yet. How do you see it?
I think when Chris says that the window has been underwhelming, I think that's been pretty optimistic. I think it's been a pretty poor window. I mean, I'm now looking at the final days of the transfer window and scrambling around to get the squad back to where it was 6 months ago. That to me is not a successful transfer window. They've spent money on maybe 15 million quid, another few in the way, on guys who have got potential and could go on to become very good players for Celtic and make a lot of money in the future. But in terms of the here and now, they haven't improved their squad. When all the talk at the end of last season, when Ange Postecoglou was there, was about taking the club to the next level, competing in Europe. When Brendan Rodgers was appointed, the same talk about competing in Europe, making a fist of the Champions League. Well, they haven't really backed that up over the summer because they haven't brought in the recruits that allow them to do that. And listen, they might bring in 3, 4, 5 guys in the next couple of days. But to be scrambling around at this stage to get those guys in, and the Champions League starts in 3 weeks, it just seems like they've kind of squandered the summer to me.
Chris, Craig, can I just add to that? Can I just add to that a little bit? The issue is, as far as I can see it, is that Brendan Rodgers has, and why there seems to be a lot of fans who are unhappy, and I think and unsettled as well, because they're unsure about the club, how they're going to perform this season, but. The issue is Brendan Rodgers has taken over from a position of strength. And if you want to compare that to Ange Postecoglou, and when he first arrived, he took over from a position of weakness, and there had to be patience. But in many respects, Celtic should not be in this position from when Brendan took over, because Mick's absolutely bang on. All the talk was when Brendan took over is making the next step in the Champions League. And it looks like Celtic are in a race to compete in the Scottish Premiership this season at this moment in time. I mean, I was looking forward to the Champions League draw. I think it's on Thursday, a couple of weeks ago. But now you're looking at this Celtic squad, thinking, well, is this squad capable of actually getting a point in the Champions League, competing in the Champions League? And let's get it right, at this moment in time, it doesn't look that way. Now, of course, things can change and change quickly in football, but we all know that this Celtic squad at this moment in time, and Brendan's admitted it himself, is that they are weaker than last season, and that's a big issue. That should never have been the case.
Well, we'll come at the Champions League in a bit more depth later, gentlemen, but I believe certainly one of you, and maybe both, has used the phrase project, discussing the signings so far. I did some research this morning. I was interested in something. At what point do you guys think a project is a project and when's a ready-made signing? And I'll tell you why I'm asking you that question. Lee Labada played 60-odd league games for Maccabi Petah Tikva before he signed for Celtic, and he was 19. Hyung Young Wan had played the same amount of first-team games at Gangwon and was 21, 2 years older. Was Lee Labada not seen as a project because he came in and scored in his debut? Or was he a project signing? Matt O'Reilly, 49 first-team games for MK Dons, just turned 21. Kwon had played more first-team games than Matt O'Reilly and was 22. Rio Hatate, less than 100 games, first-team games. Odin Holman played 100 first-team games for Vålerenga. Marco Tilio has played in the World Cup. He's won titles. Don't say Australian football's no good, because we heard that when Ange Postecoglou turned up, and look what happened there. My point being is, Cameron Carter-Vickers went around the lower leagues in England to gather quite a bit of experience, but he was 23 when he signed. So is Gustav Lagerbilk. Mike Naroki's 22. When are they projects, and when are they projects when they fail? When they come in, they're not doing well enough. I'm just putting the question out there, because these guys, if you look at it on paper, are no different from yet. Matt O'Reilly came in to a debut at Tynecastle and dominated a game. Rio Hatate scoring 2 goals in his old firm debut. They guys hit the ground running. Where's the big difference here?
I take your point, Swanee, but Rio Hatate had already been capped by Japan at that point, and played a lot of games in Japan. Kyogo was 26 and been capped by Japan.
Notice I never mentioned Kyogo.
Cameron Carter-Vickers had played for Tottenham in Europe and had 3 or 4 campaigns in the Championship under his belt. Carl Starfelt had been capped by Sweden when he arrived. And played in Europe. So you can get away with those guys if you have got 3 or 4 guys who are coming in who also have got that experience and have got 50 games under their belt or 100 games under their belt and who have played in Europe or played at a good level. So you can get away with those guys. I don't doubt for a second Abada, O'Reilly, these guys were seen as kind of guys for the future who did really well in the present, but they were supplemented to a team that was already in place who had guys with experience. You can't have a full team full of guys who haven't got that experience and are seen as projects. You can get 3 or 4.
They don't have a full team full of those guys. They have McGregor, and they have you mentioned Scotland's Player of the Year, and they have Joe Hart.
It's one of your spine team is Joe Hart, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Callum McGregor, and Kyogo. Bags of experience. The rest of it can fit in amongst it.
Yeah.
So I mean.
It's just a debate point. I just thought it was interesting. Everybody has plonked these guys into the one bracket, and I'm not sure. I think it's an easy cop out, maybe, to say, "Oh, it's the club's fault," and you know.
Yeah, but there are subtle changes, aren't there? We all know the market that Celtic, when they bring players in, what they have to shop in, and it is a development. Mark, you know, gone are the days like when I played back in the day where, Martin O'Neill, he could sign, not saying it, more experienced players, more complete players, but players still with a point to prove. I still think that stands. Things which concern me from the outside is over the last couple of seasons when Ange Postecoglou was manager. With regards to the recruitment, Ange Postecoglou, need to be careful how I word this, but he would take all the responsibility himself. He would say, this is the way we're doing things. We know he must have had a large say in the players coming in from Japan and whatever. And the recruitment didn't seem an issue. That may have been because Celtic were winning and doing well, and most of Ange Postecoglou, the recruitment at that particular time was excellent, and all the players did pretty well. What I think has changed at the start of this season, and I do think this is different, is Brendan Rodgers is sort of distancing himself from the recruitment. There's not a togetherness. It's sort of, somebody else who's bringing the players in. And that seems where there's a slight split in the camp. And of course, when there's a slight split in the camp, then supporters start to talk about it, that the club isn't harmonious. So that's where I see a little bit of difference in terms of bringing players in. It's about their ability to do the job. I just look back a season and I look, you go through the Celtic team a season ago and you think, blimey, this is a strong team, a strong squad. Joe Hart, Juranovic at right back, Alistair Johnson, there's a debate to say, who was the better player, but, strong. Carter Vickers, Starfelt, really excellent partnership, really more than solid. Greg Taylor playing in that inverted role did so well. A confident Greg Taylor, who is a real asset for the team. Surprised me the way he's developed, but did well. He seems to have lost form. You look at the midfield, McGregor was flying. Hatate now, player of the season in my book last season, outstanding season he had. Looks like he doesn't want to sign a new contract at Celtic. You had Aaron Moy and O'Reilly, sacrificed himself for the team when McGregor was out for a large part of that season. Aaron Moy was a really excellent signing eventually. Celtic had a strong team. You had Jota, you had Giakoumakis coming off the bench for Kyogo. Abada off that right-hand side. Good competition for places. Now you look at Celtic's team going into the Champions League, going into the Scottish Premiership season, and something isn't quite right. And of course, the injuries haven't helped. But you go back, and of course, we're entitled to look back on last season and think, why aren't Celtic at that strength again when they've got the big money in for Jota? They've got Champions League football, and everybody is entitled to ask the question and even answer the question. It shouldn't be like this at this stage.
Michael, there is absolutely no doubt. Well, making the points earlier, starting players are required, were required, and probably should have been brought in earlier. There was the situation where, for example, Ray Hatate was clearly struggling with his form and wasn't doing enough in the manager's eyes to get in the team. With Aaron Moy already gone, that should maybe have been addressed at the time for the season starting. Of course, you have to wait till the end of the window, I suppose, to see how it all shakes down. But there is an argument that these guys should all have been in place before a competitive ball was kicked. However, maybe if you want the ones you exactly want, you have to wait for. We won't know that until Friday at midnight, and probably you and I will still be sitting there at 12:30, Michael, in the car park. But how do you view it yourself? Were you in agreement with Chris on most of those points, or all of them?
What I think kind of perplexes me slightly is speaking to Postecoglou kind of towards the tail end of last season, and even before that, back to the AGM, the talk was, listen, we know Celtic's model, it's been really successful, it's worked really well, but that's 2 years in a row they've had direct entry into the Champions League and the money that brings. They've sold Jota. There's another 10 million plus coming in the way for Frimpong's sell-on fee this week as well, looks like. Plenty of money in the bank. Postecoglou hinted at it last year that at some point, you need to jump up a level so that you recruit guys with potential, but they're at a higher starting point of potential because they're now got money in the bank, a position of strength. It's time to elevate the club. Not taking massive jumps. I'm not talking about throwing 100 million quid at players. I'm saying that you can gradually, rather than going for £2 million prospects, sign £5 million prospects and then sell them for 15 and 20 million pound in 2 years' time. What I'm saying is that this was a chance this summer to elevate the club gradually, replace players who did well the last 2 years with better players, and they haven't done that this summer, whether you like it or not. And then whether it happens the next 3 or 4 days will be interesting. But they haven't replaced good players with better players, and they've lost better players and replaced it with guys who are projects. And that's not really a great strategy for where they are at this point in time in terms of their financial might. This Champions League situation isn't going to last forever. You need to perform in Europe to keep automatic entry to the Champions League. And we touched on it earlier, they don't look equipped to deal with that at this moment to get the points required to stay in the Champions League longer term and keep the money coming in. So this was a summer they could have taken the incremental steps to elevating the entire club and the entire squad, and I don't think they've done that.
So the question is, So the question is how have we got here? Why, why are we here at this point in time? And and the saving grace, if there is one for Celtic, is that that they have time to resurrect this situation. But I think you made the point, Craig, which was, really quite important. I think that getting the work done early, a bit of continuity, getting the team into a rhythm was the most important thing. And Celtic clearly haven't done that. And it's been a problem. And you could see, from the first 15 minutes of the season, and that's 15 minutes against Ross County, things weren't right. Aberdeen, albeit positive result, difficult place to go to. There were issues within the framework of the team. So, Kilmarnock wasn't a surprise. St Johnstone was a surprise, but maybe that's not going to be a bad thing in the long run, and that's the jolt, the kick up the backside that the club actually needed. But there will be questions as to how we actually got to that stage, and it'd be interesting to hear Mick on this. Was it arrogance, Mick? Was it taking the Scottish League too lightly, thinking that the squad are better than they are? I mean, most people would have sat and thought, well, Jota was a different type of player to anything Celtic have got. Maida and Abada, similar players in terms of, they're direct. They wouldn't dictate the pace of a game and be able to slow it down like Jota. Didn't have that decisive pass like Jota. So, he hasn't been replaced. I mean, how do you see it, Mick?
No, I don't know about the arrogance thing. I think Celtic still, I don't think it's a crisis in the home front with Celtic. I think they've got more than enough tools to have a successful season in the home front.
Can I just check in for a second? Chris, see, for all the transfer business should have been done earlier, could and should have been done earlier, the 16 player, whatever players that were used on Saturday against St Johnstone, would you, as a Celtic manager, think you could expect to send a team out to beat St Johnstone last Saturday? There was surely in the squad and on the pitch. Sorry, Michael.
Should be more than well equipped. I think that
it's not just a transfer.
You're absolutely spot on. So where Celtic are at this moment in time, that's there's a number of issues. It's not just one issue. The issue which I cannot understand. Okay, I can understand why Celtic end up selling Jota for 25 million. Carl Starfelt, right? Selling him when they sold him to Celta Vigo, I think it was absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Carl Starfelt was under contract at Celtic. Celtic rushed Carter Vickers back. I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with why he's broken down. He's out for a couple of months. That's I don't know that, but it may have just happened anyway. But Starfelt was a rock for Celtic alongside Carter Vickers. I know he had the odd brick in him, but Celtic, in my opinion, should have held on to him. And then, had they been in a situation with centre halves where the centre halves were good enough, and Brendan had a trust within them that he had a partnership where Celtic were going to be more than solid, watertight, and every faith that they could compete in the Champions League and go to Ibrox and have a shutout. Then he could have sold Carl Starfelt to Celta Vigo, but selling him that early, really, I just think was really madness, and they've sort of shot themselves in the foot. They go into the game at the weekend against Rangers now with a centre-half partnership. Who knows? It looks like it's going to be Scales and Lager Bielka, who have played together once. I mean, it doesn't, with the greatest respect to both players, it doesn't inspire you with, total confidence. The Celtic backline, Greg Taylor, has barely kicked a ball this season. He looks a shadow of the player which he was last season. Alistair Johnston is coming back. He's been out a fair while now. Anthony Ralston, he's going to give it a go, and he's able enough. But you're looking at that back line, and if you're Rangers, not that their forward line, is absolutely firing, but you're thinking, blimey, that's a real opportunity to get after Celtic. That's just the way it is, isn't it?
Michael, apologies for checking your run at the edge of the box there when you were just starting off. I think VR.
You missed a cracker as well. It came out, it was a bit of a cracker.
Well, if you can continue where you were going to go, but just to wrap up the transfer side of things before we move on to the Champions League draw, as Chris alluded to, Jota leaving to be replaced by, it looks like this week, and it will be Lewis Palmer this week. That's 8 weeks later. Does that sum it up? And tell us about Lewis Palmer, if you could.
Exactly. The kid sounds like a lot of potential. Speaking to people who work with him, he's a great attitude,
You're back to a project again.
A little bit. He's 23.
Is he a project or is he a first-team player?
Maybe a bit higher level project.
He's a first-team player, surely.
You've got a good attitude, Mick. It doesn't make you a Celtic player.
This is very true. Or any kind of player. No, it does sound.
He's got a bad attitude and be a good one. Sorry, can you?
He's got a lot of attitude. He can play anywhere across the front. Play left wing, right wing, number 10. So yeah, I mean, he's not going to be the new Jota, because I think that was he struck gold with that signing, didn't he? But he does sound like an interesting addition. Who will bring something to the squad wherever he plays. So yeah, listen, they will do business before the window shuts, and I imagine there'll be some fairly hefty moves. A loan deal for a centre half, I think, is a must. That might have to wait to the final moments of the window for that one, unfortunately. Listen,
hefty for you dragging yourself up the stairs for the press conference.
Well, that's true. But to play devil's advocate, it is a difficult market for Celtic are in. I mean, the shifting sands with Saudi Arabia and English market. English football bleat all the time now about Saudi Arabian money and all that stuff. No, they're coming to get our best players. England have been doing that for 20 years, and they're still doing it. I mean, Sheffield United signing strikers that don't get a game for Middlesbrough for 20 million quid. The market's gone bonkers. When you mentioned Chris is moving a few years ago, Celtic could not buy a Chris Sutton now. I mean, Chris, what would you be worth in today's market? I mean, let's say you broke the transfer record twice down south. All right, a bit of an off-season at Chelsea, but so did Lukaku. But you're talking, how much would it cost to sign a Chris Sutton now?
Well, I mean, on the Monday Night Club,
comes with a lot of baggage, Michael. A lot of baggage.
Yeah, on the Monday Night Club 5 Live a few months ago now, so I would have actually gone up even more. I think it was about 4 or 5 months ago. A guy who wrote The Price of Football, Kieran Maguire's name, valued me at 101 million in today's market. So I'd probably be about 150 now, Mick.
150 million?
You'd be the price of your house.
And you're lucky enough to work with me.
It's not a Turkish move. That's not Turkish lira, Chris, that we're talking here. That's a Galatasaray move.
That's a cricket market.
I think that's the market. I mean, Anthony Gordon, 50 million. I mean, to get a kind of bang average Premier League striker, you're at 20, 30, 40 million quid. So, you're not probably far wrong, Chris.
Michael,
I'm not wrong.
Priceless to this podcast, Chris Sutton. Priceless. Talking of overinflated values and big egos, Champions League draw Thursday. Michael, Celtic should have been bouncing into this Champions League draw, shouldn't they? Really excited and looking forward to who they were going to be playing against, who they were going to be pitted against, and looking forward to making the next step. No one seems to have mentioned it.
Hiding behind the couch, I think, is more the approach this Thursday. Listen, I get it. I mean, I think fans will be a bit worried. Listen, I think the target, as always, for Celtic in this current climate should be not to get embarrassed by the big 2 seeds and then try and nick that third spot off the third seed and get into the Europa League after Christmas. That would be a successful Champions League campaign.
Reach for the stars, Mick.
But listen, that's the reality, Chris. Listen, we go back to it. Listen, we're being
quite critical. Half empty all the time, you are, aren't you?
Well, we're being quite critical, right? Celtic's budget in terms of wage bill is probably top end of the championship.
You're now bringing the old budget card into. How do other clubs feel in Scotland?
Would you expect Derby to go and compete in the Champions League? No, you wouldn't. So we demand Celtic do.
But they're not in the right division, Mick.
Well, you know what I mean. Whoever's in that division these days. But it's a difficult ask. So if they can get through, survive some of these games against the big teams, and then maybe nick points at home, and then get a result against the third seed and get that third spot, that would be a successful Champions League campaign. But it's potentially could be very, very difficult. We've seen these teams before, even when Celtic have been strong, and it's been really, really tough. So I can imagine that there's the kind of trade-off, isn't there? The glamour ties or the potential doons. It's a difficult one to balance.
Chris, you just said Celtic are weaker now than they were at the start of last season, and Celtic were unable to get a win in the group stages.
Yeah, I mean,
where does the confidence / belief / get injected from?
Yeah, I mean, I've just jumped all over Mick, but I do actually tend to agree with him. At this moment in time,
so you're saying Michael didn't help me up?
You are glass half empty at this moment in time. I mean, it's actually, the way Celtic have performed so far this season. It's actually hard to see Celtic, getting a point in the Champions League based on performances. But we're a few weeks away now, so there's lots of room for improvement. But I'm sick of going to Celtic Park, and my sons are big Celtic fans, and come up for the Champions League nights, and I'm saying to them, you've got to make sure you're in your seat half an hour before the game, because that's sort of been the best part, going to Celtic over the last sort of few seasons in the Champions League, or even longer. Before the game, when the game starts, it's a normally been a disappointment. I've got to say, last season I did enjoy Celtic and Ange Postecoglou and the way they played against Real Madrid, and I thought Ange Postecoglou was a little bit unlucky, in the Champions League.
You called him lucky. Oh, there we go.
Unlucky.
I did Michael Beale.
I got Andrew on the phone to you.
I meant unlucky.
Clip that up. Clip that up.
I couldn't get the words out properly. I think he's a bit unlucky with his approach. Actually, he took the game to Real Madrid, as he said he'd take the game to Real Madrid. They ended up a little bit of naivety at the end, losing, against Shakhtar away. I think that was a disappointment, drawing a game they should have won. I think Leipzig deserved to edge Celtic over two legs. I've spoken before about Real Madrid away and watching Celtic loading the box sort of after 65 minutes when they're 5-0 down, watching through my fingers in the commentary box, thinking, what on earth is going on here? That was a disappointment. But do you know what? The shape of the team going into the Champions League this season, I do worry for them and fear for them, which is why these next few days are so important, because it doesn't look like Carter Vickers is going to be ready for the start of the Champions League campaign, and that's a huge problem for Celtic. But I am concerned for Celtic going into this season's competition, and to think a few weeks ago, or when Brendan arrived, talk about that next step. And I mean, you boys will know this better than me, Brendan being given a war chest, which I don't know. I mean, I think you guys, I don't know whether you wrote it, but that I think that was the sort of common perception, that Brendan would be given a war chest and a chance to compete in the Champions League. And Celtic have got a job on in the Scottish Premiership this season, making sure they come out top dogs by the look of the way they've played over the first few games this season. But it is early, and there's plenty of room for improvement. I think
what Chris says, Michael, and the way he summed up last season's Champions League campaign for Celtic under Ange Postecoglou. You looked at the Leipzig games, and Chris is talking about war chests, and Leipzig were nowhere near the second, the top bracket or the top team of the second seeds. They had Nkunku, who went to Chelsea for the price of a house in the state. Schloboslai's gone to Liverpool. They were an absolutely top class team. Guardiola. I mean, that was the pot 2 team. And they weren't the best pot 2 team.
Yeah,
it gives you an example of, we've spoken about it endlessly on this podcast. And Chris is right to try and be positive about it. And it has been shown in the past that clubs can go and punch and get results. But it just feels that it's getting harder and harder for Scottish clubs and other clubs of the same level of league. It's tough, Michael, surely.
Oh, it is, but Rangers beat them 6 months earlier. And deservedly so. So there's
Celtic pod, mate.
There's ways to do it. Yeah, well, it's a result that is relevant, because Celtic lost them the following season. So there is ways to do it. And I think Celtic in a lot of the games played really well, created a lot of chances. Ones that got away, and they rammed into the first hour. It was frantic and good fun. Wee bit of naivety. The home game against Shakhtar was so naive as well. They were playing pretty well and got caught in the counter a couple of times. That was a bit silly. Leipzig got out class. So that it's a tough environment, isn't it? It's really ruthless. It's the problems that I've got now is they do look defensively vulnerable, don't they?
If Ross County are causing Celtic major problems, if Aberdeen are causing Celtic problems, if St Johnstone are creating opportunities, Kilmarnock, cause Celtic, strife at the back, then what are Celtic fans thinking? They're thinking what we're all thinking. Celtic are bang in trouble unless things change. And then, how are they going to change? Well, we know they're going to change if they bring, a one or two quality loans in. But where are they going to come from?
That glass half full's just tipped all over the.
I know. I was trying my best.
He's grabbing results in the Champions League. Oh my goodness!
Honestly, collect your check and forget about it.
Right, it's probably best at this point to put the Champions League to bed.
That is me being glass half full.
Celtic will probably do that as soon as the draw's done because they've got major business to attend to in the transfer market on Friday. But of course, Rangers versus Celtic on Sunday at Ibrox. Michael, again, at this stage of the podcast, it's difficult to know exactly what the makeup of the Celtic team is going to be. But as it stands at the moment, how do you view the game and where Celtic need to be, where the major improvements would need to be to get a result at Ibrox on Sunday?
Listen, we have seen far, far, far worse Celtic teams going to Ibrox and winning, and vice versa, against better Rangers teams and vice versa. So I wouldn't be discounting Celtic at the park right away. This is still a live game, and they've got every chance of going there and getting a result. Where I'm worried for Celtic is set pieces defensively. Celtic are not particularly a big or a physical team, whereas Rangers, if you look at the current lineup, their new signings, they're a big side, and they will look to get balls into the box, corner kicks, free kicks, set pieces, and that's where I think Celtic will get big problems, and that could be the area of concern that I think they need to sort out. I say a lone centre half is absolutely imperative, even if they can chuck them right in. But Celtic have got the attacking players that can no doubt cause Rangers problems. The game will be slightly more open than they've had against like your Ross Counties, Aberdeen, St Johnstone's. So it's not that kind of slow, kind of try to break a team down stuff. Rangers will need to come out and attack, which leaves them a little bit vulnerable. So I think this game is wide open. I would say Rangers have to start as favourites because they're a slightly more settled team. But Celtic have got every chance of going there and getting a result. So I wouldn't be going there with trepidation. I think that Celtic should go there and be bold and a little bit confident, but at the same time they need to be better defensively.
Chris, as you know, it's been proven several times, and Michael and I were talking earlier in the week. I think there was a Celtic team went to Ibrox 4 years ago. I think the back four was Hatem El Hamid, virtually his first game, Chris Julian, virtually his first game, Near Beaton playing at centre half in his usual emergency late summer role, Bolly Bolingoli at left back. Beaton ended up getting injured. El Hamid ended up at centre half. Maurice Jens was playing. Johnny Hayes ended up in the back four, and Celtic still won. So that is proof that, as Michael says, they can pretty much go there and win regardless of the condition of the team, because that's just how the fixture is. Where do you see it being won and lost?
Well, I think we've been pretty open and honest about where Celtic are at this particular time. But I'm with Mick in terms of Rangers' physicality and set pieces. I think it's a big problem for Celtic, and that may end up being a decisive part of the game for Rangers. But I wouldn't be getting the bunting out just yet. About Rangers, because I got to say, from what I've seen, I don't think they've been great, and I don't think things have clicked for them yet this season. They lost to Kilmarnock on the opening day and got past Servette with a couple of okay performances. I think PSV, we're going to find out how they get on against PSV. I thought PSV were far superior to Rangers in Rangers' own backyard. So I don't think it's clicked just yet for Rangers. So in that respect, I don't think Celtic, will go there, fearing Rangers in any respect. And if Celtic turn up, then there's every chance that they will win the game. But I do think that, the set plays may become a problem. It's just hard to predict, because Celtic certainly haven't cracked it and have got a lot of work to do this season, but Rangers haven't cracked it as well by any stretch of the imagination. So we know how mad Scottish football is. Within the space, Celtic win the first couple of games, all of a sudden they're out of the League Cup, and people are comparing Brendan to his, what he did last time, 7 from 7 before. Now he's 0 from 1. But Celtic can't win the treble every season. That's the truth. Celtic fans have been spoilt with their success over numerous years, winning so many trebles in the last decade. I mean, that's pretty incredible. But there's always that tinge of disappointment when you get knocked out of the first possible trophy, that competition of the season. But the most important thing from a Celtic supporters' point of view is to have faith within the team. And I think we're all looking at the Celtic team at this moment in time and thinking they need vast areas of improvement in virtually every aspect. Defensively, Celtic have looked all over the place. The truth is, in midfield, McGregor hasn't really got going this season yet. Turnbull over Hatate was a really contentious decision from Brendan in the first game. I'm not so sure he got that right. And, the fact of the matter is Hatate, I don't know, you'll know this better than me, but the fact that all the rumours are him not wanting to sign a new deal, I don't think that's good for Celtic. O'Reilly has actually been one of Celtic's better players, but I don't think that they necessarily have great legs in that middle of the park. You could question the dynamism, and I think Hatate certainly gives them that. Of course, he's not going to be there at the weekend. And in those sort of forward wide areas, I don't think Celtic have clicked at this moment in time. So a lot of work to do, but they can still go to Ibrox and win the game, because I don't think, as I said, think Rangers have necessarily.
Michael, that's exactly the point, surely, because you go through the Celtic team, they haven't performed as the way they should this season. They haven't played till they've been nowhere near it. They're still top of the league. Callum McGregor has the ability to run a Celtic versus Rangers game. He's done it a million times. Matt O'Reilly's done it. Kyogo's a constant scorer, whether you want to debate his position or not at the moment. He's proven now a proven goal scorer in the fixture. Dyson Mader's scored at Ibrox. Leila Bada's caused Rangers damage on countless occasions. There are plenty of weapons in the Celtic team that can go and do damage to Rangers. So it can be flipped over quite easily. Would you agree with that and what Chris is saying? That they're equally
we're debating the kind of bigger picture stuff, the European, the places of the Celtic's long-arching strategies. But in terms of the team itself, there's plenty of good players in that team who have proved their worth over a long period of time, and especially in these games. When you look at, you mentioned Maida, Kyogo, Abada, O'Reilly, these guys have performed against Rangers many, many times. They've actually got the blueprint to how to damage Rangers. I mean, if you play wide, you get Maida and Abada attacking the fullbacks and Kyogo hitting the front post. Rangers have really struggled, high pressing against centre-halves at the back. Saw the goals last season. Rangers conceded getting freaked out with that high press. So Celtic know what's required against this Rangers defence to get a bit of joy. And they've got attacking players to do it. I don't actually think that the early teething problems in the league are that big a concern. I think there's always going to be some sort of period adjustment to the way that Brendan Rodgers wants them to play. And it's not quite clicked yet. It was quite funny at the weekend watching Arthur Johnson when he for his first start of the season, obviously. And a few times he actually kind of looked a wee bit lost in terms of his position in the pitch, because obviously he was into that inverted role and forgetting where he was and then having to get back out again. And I think you've seen a wee bit of Greg Taylor maybe struggling a wee bit getting back to that kind of role as well. So it'll be interesting this weekend. Would Brendan Rodgers be better getting back to the method from last season and take a leaf from Postecoglou's book and playing that way against Rangers, because that's been a successful way of damaging Rangers? I don't know. It must be quite tempting, because if it's not broke, don't need to fix it. Will he do that? I don't know, because obviously you've got to chuck in Palma. I wouldn't imagine he'd be starting at Ibrox, but it's one to think about as well. But it'll be interesting to see how he lines it up.
There you go, Chris. There's one for you. Would Brendan Rodgers take the Ange Postecoglou blueprint?
I think Celtic's best bet is to get after Rangers. I don't think Rangers front line is fired. I still think that Rangers really miss Ryan Kent. I think Todd Cantwell, actually, he's the one where he played in a bit of a deeper role at Ross County, but he's the one where it looks like something will happen in and around him, like in terms of creative, but I don't think Dessers has necessarily hit his straps just yet. Danilo, absolutely not. Be interesting to see who Rangers play in those forward areas and how they set up about it. I think the midfield battle is going to be absolutely crucial. And what worries me is the Celtic and the legs in there, because what do we know? We know that Raskin has decent legs and, pretty dynamic. But I do think the Celtics front line can certainly hurt Rangers. I've got to say, from Rangers' point of view, I think that that John Suter has had a strong start to the season for them, and that partnership with Goldson looks to be pretty solid. But we do know from last season and previous seasons, John Suter does have a rick in him, but he's looked solid this season. Barisic is always one that I think that Celtic can get at defensively. We know he's got good delivery in the final third, and similar with Tavernier. But it's one of those. If it clicks for Celtic, of course they can go to Ibrox and win the game. But I think they need to be brave, have the sort of courage and conviction and take the game to Rangers. And if they do that, then as I say, I haven't been that convinced with Rangers so far. I know there's been a bit of excitement about their performance at Ross County. Ross County barely laid a glove on them, and see they were talked up a fair bit after the PSV game where they had 30% possession. The quality of their goals was very good, but I didn't see the game like most people in terms of I thought PSV were far superior, and I think Rangers have got it all to do. And we just talked about Celtic for the best part of 40 minutes, and their disappointing start to the season. But you can now flip it. Rangers lost the first league game to Kilmarnock. If they go out against PSV in the week and then lose to Celtic at the weekend, they'll be at a crisis point. You're never far from a crisis in Glasgow, are you? Whoever you are.
Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Well, we've got a couple of things just to finish up. Chris, you've had your say, and no doubt will again, on the lack of visiting fans that will be in the stadium on Sunday for Celtic, and maybe the same for Rangers when they go to Celtic Park. Looks like that will be the case, but you've spoken about that. One thing we haven't spoken to you about is being a social media wizard that you are and never off it. Saeed Haksabanovic, how would that have gone down in your dressing room?
He's an idiot, really, isn't he? I don't know what he's thinking. If you have a problem, go and knock on the manager's door. Absolutely that. I can understand his frustration that he feels he hasn't played enough games, hasn't started enough games. Ange Postecoglou brought him in, but he didn't start him in a lot of games, and for a reason. And the bottom line is, as a player, you have to earn the right. And I think there is a strong argument to say that he hasn't earned the right to start enough games. So do your talking on the pitch. But that wouldn't have gone down well in our dressing room. Never understand that why players. If I was a current player now, there's no way I'd be on social media, and you certainly don't go out and try and be cryptic, about it. Just front up and go and bang on the manager's door and tell him you're unhappy. And then the manager can possibly tell you that you haven't been good enough, you've been hopeless. That's why you're not starting, and move him out if that's the way. But that's not the way a player should be acting.
Is that what you did when Tim Martin, when Big John took your place?
Did he?
Did you ever go by a manager's door? Tell us. God, you must have. You must have been Rick. Were you an unruly player when you were left it?
I went knocking on Ray Harford's door at Blackburn when he left me out, which I thought was unjust in terms of with Martin O'Neill. Wherever he told me to play, I just did it because I was scared of Martin. So and that was, I was always pretty honest though. In truth, in that I used to be far more critical of myself than any manager ever would be. So if you're playing well and you feel you're in form and you've done enough, then that's another argument. If you genuinely feel that the manager is wrong, but I think the three of us would struggle to look at Haksabanovic and remember, maybe 2 or 3 games on the spin. Whether he's ever played 2 or 3 games on the spin for Celtic, I very much doubt it. But where he has made that much of an impact, where he can honestly turn around and say, "Well, do you know what? I should be in this team," and that's his issue. As much you can't fool supporters, you can't fool the manager, and the manager will be saying, well, based on what I've seen, hasn't been good enough. But this isn't a Hatate situation as far as I could see it, where he was a regular under Ange Postecoglou. You know, Haksabanovic wasn't a regular under Ange Postecoglou. He was more of a sub. So if two managers are thinking the same thing, maybe as a player you have to recognise that, and you know, both managers are telling you you're not good enough. But it's up to you. You do your talking on the pitch. It's as simple as that.
Michael, same feeling.
Bags packed. There's a door. Off you pop. I think that's. I mean, there's these instances. There's a little bit too many popping up at Celtic this summer. I mean, Bernabei sleep in for a meeting and all that kind of stuff. A few petted lips get a bit of place. If you don't like it, off you go.
You sleep in for things all the time. Come on.
Well, listen, I'm up with the lark. If I just fall asleep during it, that's a problem. No, listen, Haksabanovic has had his chances. It's all right looking great when you're 3-0 up and you put on for the last half an hour and you score a couple of goals and it finishes up 5-0. That's fantastic. Every time he starts a game, he's not delivered. This summer should have been his big chance. I mean, we spoke to him out in Japan and we said, Jota's away. This is a big opportunity for you. And he practically said, yeah, I can be the new Jota. I'm the man. With Brendan Rodgers coming in, he's the ideal guy for Brendan Rodgers. He kind of plays that kind of Stuart Armstrong kind of role. He can play number 10. He can play off the sides. He's got a bit of ability. He should be grabbing this chance with both hands, but he's not. He's flat to deceive all the way through pre-season. Come off the bench a couple of times, not done an awful lot, and then spat the dummy. For him a taxi. Up the road, son.
May turn out to be that he is the new Jota, and the fact he'll be following him out the door. Gentlemen,
I actually think that there is, you know, we have seen like moments where there is a player in there, but you know, you've got to prove yourself. That you know, that's
not good enough. It's not good enough. Isn't Chris? It's not good enough. Moments aren't good enough. There's players.
No,
players
absolutely.
With history who had one good game in 4. That's not good enough.
Yeah. And then, you know, maybe there's that frustration, you know, which is why, you know, weak moment he's gone on Instagram or wherever he put the thing out. But, you know, it's up to his missus or, you know, a member of his family to tell him not to be so stupid. My missus does that to me a lot when I'm thinking about sending out some provocative tweets at times. Don't be so stupid, Chris.
You must have 2 phones then, because it doesn't stop you. Gentlemen, on that note, thank you very much for your time and your opinions. Much appreciated. Thank you all for listening, and we'll speak to you soon. Good luck.